Alec Lasley from thehoosier.com joining us now. How are you, sir?
Good, guys. How are you doing?
Cannot complain. It is an absolutely gorgeous Friday in the month of August, which has felt like early October for this week. Luckily for IU football, those lucky guys are all of football players because, like I said, when I was in school playing and it was two-a-days, which they don't even have anymore, we had to walk to two-a-day practice uphill both ways. You know how that goes, right? But just kidding. On the basketball side of things, recruiting hot and heavy there over the course of a 7, 8, 9-day period with 5 consecutive visits, 3 of which were active decision makers, 2 of or 25 classmen, Jalen Harrelson and Trent Sisley, of course. But Deshaun Harris-Smith has not committed yet. Jamie Kaiser is committed to Maryland. And then the big man in the middle, Arrington Page, has yet to make any announcements. But Michigan State picking up Cohen Carr, first of all, and Xavier Booker. I know that some people see that as a big loss by Indiana, and I don't know that I do, because I'm not saying that they wouldn't have taken Xavier Booker had he committed to Indiana, but they knew where the tea leaves were reading, and it seems like they had kind of backed off on both of those 2 players.
Yeah, I mean, the Booker recruitment is one that I think a lot of people are kind of over by now. I think it was more so the shift to Cohen Carr. But if you look back to Booker, that was definitely an interesting recruitment from start to finish, just because of how quickly he rose up to at one point the number 1 overall player in the class. After G.G. Jackson decided to reclassify to 2022, and Booker took over that number 1 spot in the 23 class. But that was one where Indiana was involved pretty heavily on early in the recruitment. Kind of took a step back, wanted to see how he progressed in his junior year. Didn't have a bad junior year by any means, but just didn't show, I think, what the staff wanted. And that was mainly with the consistency and the motor that they wanted to see from game to game. And so they backed off a little bit there, but then it seemed like everyone outside of, the state of Indiana and a couple of those Midwest schools decided to jump into that recruitment. And I think really spearheaded a lot of, FOMO for a lot of these other programs of at least not getting involved. And so I think Indiana saw what he did to begin some of the live periods in the summer, and it kind of early part of the spring tried to get back involved a little bit more. But, at that point, it was pretty much locked up that it was going to be Michigan State. I think that recruitment dragged on a lot longer than what people were expecting. And I think the main reason for that was just to see kind of what the Dukes, the Gonzagas, the Kentuckys were going to do. But that quickly, went nowhere with Duke and Gonzaga pretty much not watching him at all during the June live evaluation periods, and pretty much, put an axe in whatever type of recruitment that was going to be. And I think at that point, he was pretty much set on Michigan State, but wanted to just play out the rest of the summer. Went on a couple visits, but nothing too much. So when you kind of shift to Cohen Carr, though, I think that's one that Indiana fans are probably going to be a little bit more disappointed in, just because that was one after his junior year official visit. He was pretty much ready to commit to Indiana. Obviously going to wait a little bit just to see what happened with him. He was going to set up a few other visits, but talking with him and his mom after that visit, I mean, there was not anything else Indiana could have done to get him to commit. And then I think obviously Indiana kind of took their foot off the gas with him. I think it would have been interesting to see Indiana's recruitment of Cohen Carr if he did not miss the first couple live evaluation periods in the spring and summer with the broken finger. I think that really kind of set him back in terms of what Indiana was going to do, whether they were going to go all in on him or whether they were, eventually going to do what they did and back off. And that is in large part due to his lack of shooting ability from the outside, and Indiana's really kind of prioritizing of bigger wings who can shoot the ball. And that's why they went after Jamie Kaiser. That's why they went after TJ Power, Stojakovic, and a lot of those guys, and a lot of those bigger wings obviously didn't come to fruition at this point, but that's where they went, and that's what happened obviously with Cohen Carr.
There seems, I mean, I can see where some people would think that there might be an issue with this staff committing to recruits, which I know that guys like Jalen Harrelson and Trent Sisley, they are committed. They're all in. But it seems like the first year, and even this season, they're hot and then they're not. And, you know, those players see that. They feel that. They know that. So are they kicking the tires too much on some of these players? Because you've got a guy like Tom Izzo who just made a gigantic splash in a late recruiting class that has come together to be very nice, parts of which that he has gotten, still making a statement that he can still get some of the best players from the state of Indiana. So, you know, is there any issue of them kicking the tires too much?
I don't think so, because I mean, if you look outside of obviously, you know, what happened with Jamie Kaiser and TJ Power, you know, those things are, you know, somewhat out of your control. I think if Jamie Kaiser lived anywhere else outside of Maryland, he probably was going to go to Indiana. But what Indiana was able to do in that recruitment can't really go unnoticed, and it shouldn't. The fact that they were able to get him to commit to any program about 2.5 months after he originally wanted to just shows you, you know, what power they really do have when it comes to kind of flipping recruitments, not so much getting guys to commit. But I mean, look, I think Mike Woodson and this staff has a pretty good track record of when they go all in and they want a kid, they do a pretty good job of landing that kid. Obviously, people are going to look at, you know, have some recency bias with Jamie Kaiser and TJ Power as the two notable guys. But you know, if Indiana ends up landing Arrington Page and you go into the college basketball season with the 2023 class of Arrington Page, Gabe Cupps, and Ja'Kai Newton, I think all is well in the world. I think even if you go into this college basketball season with Ja'Kai Newton and Gabe Cupps, everything is still going to be fine. I don't think there needs to be such a worry about missing out on a couple of kids when you have the entire spring and you have the entire transfer portal window, which I think is more of a priority for this Indiana staff than it is landing, you know, 4 to 5 high school kids each and every class, because those guys, you're probably going to end up with at most, I would say two out of every, you know, 4 or 5 guys that you bring in that end up staying to their junior, senior year, whether that means they go pro, whether that means they transfer out. That's just the way the college basketball is trending. So I think the staff is just putting, you know, a little bit less of a priority on, you know, landing some of these kids, and they're putting a bigger priority of casting a wider net, and from there, kind of seeing a trickle down effect into, you know, prioritizing 4 or 5 kids. And if they get 2 of those, I think they feel pretty good about themselves. If they get 1, I think they still feel fine. Obviously, you know, we'll see what happens when they don't get any. And I think that's going to be the case if, you know, for some reason Indiana does not land Arrington Page, then I think you're going to have, you know, a little bit of a shift going into next year of how they may prioritize some of these kids. But up to this point, I think Mike Woodson and the staff have definitely shown that when they want a kid, they do a pretty good job of landing that one, and at least keeping their options open for, you know, the late signing period, which they've been extremely successful in with Mike Woodson in 2 years, and getting some pretty talented players through the transfer portal as well.
Except for one area, they have yet to land, and no offense to CJ Gunn, because we don't know what he's going to be able to do. He may fit the bill, but while he is known as somewhat of a shooter, he was 3-star, so he's not known as the elite shooter. Not saying he can't be or isn't. He very well may be that. But the one thing that Mike Woodson and staff have not landed over the 2 years is an elite shooter. And that continues to be a talking point, especially when you see Purdue with no NIL situation, land a bunch of those type guys. Michigan State, which I'm sure they have an NIL deal in process. I haven't heard much about anything to do with NIL there. So they're doing this kind of without making a lot of noise about NIL. So just that's still an area, and it's the weirdest area of all for an Indiana team, as we all have spoken about, but to not have landed that quote unquote elite shooter.
Yeah, I mean, to a certain extent, right? I mean, you look at what they did with Parker Stewart. Obviously, that was before Mike Woodson really got fully settled in, because Parker Stewart was going to go anywhere that Kenya Hunter was. So you get Parker Stewart, you get Miller Kopp. I think you look at those two. Obviously, did not have the seasons that they were expected to have last year for Indiana, but they went out and they landed two extremely talented shooters. Now it didn't work out the way that they thought, but if Miller Kopp comes back and has the year that a lot of people thought it had last year, things change, and you get CJ Gunn again. Like you said, you don't know what's going to happen in college, but terrific shooter in high school. You can't look past that. I mean, he set the Lawrence North record for most threes in a game. You don't just roll up on a kid like that and not expect him to do that at the next level either. And from all accounts this summer, he's been fantastic, not only shooting the ball, but being a two-way player. And, at a certain point, you just have to look at, Indiana's been in this rut of not being able to shoot the ball for, 6, 7, 8 years. I don't know what the solution is to that, because it seems like they've brought in kids who can shoot the ball. They just don't translate to the next level. And I think a lot of that has to do not so much with that player specifically, but I think you have to look at the roster around them, and you have to look at the lack of playmakers and people who can beat others off of the dribble, and say that's probably the thorn in Indiana's offense over the last almost decade at this point. And so I think this year is going to be a crucial year, because you have that with Xavier Johnson, you have that with Jalen Hood-Schifino, and you have that with some other players as well who can create off of the dribble. Tamar Bates is another guy, and you put those three out there with better floor spacing, and not two guys who can't create off of the dribble, and that's Miller Kopp and Parker Stewart. So you bring in a little bit of better floor spacing, some better playmakers, and I think you're going to see. I'm not going to tag him as an elite shooter, but I think you're going to see a much better year out of Miller Kopp, and a guy who's going to be a very consistent shooter from the perimeter. And if that happens, I think this is a moot point moving forward, because Mike Woodson has brought in playmakers and will continue to bring in playmakers who can drive and kick. And that's what Indiana's biggest problem has been over the last 5, 6, 7 years.
Yeah, Five Left says CJ Gunn has swag and supreme confidence. I think if Woody gives him the green light, he will rise to the occasion. Very, 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 very possible. I am not doubting that at all, because I saw him do nothing but that in his senior season in high school. Brad wants to see what an offseason of development under Woodson. So we'll see about that. We got lots more to talk about with Alec Lasley from thehoosier.com.